All right, this is If My People, Bible reading part 192. Got the numbers right. Sorry about that. Um, Pay attention in the beginning and where I start from. You'll know we are in the book of Romans, when chapter 12. So we had an introduction to Romans, then we had part 1, which is 191, and then part 192, which is the second part that we've gotten into so far. One of the questions that have come up is a number of you have asked this. They said about Paul and what makes Paul so different from the other believers who were there, who when the Ruach came down on them in Shavuot, in Pentecost, those people were scattered everywhere. You can tell because when Paul went into Turkey, he did not necessarily start churches, did he? He didn't start churches. Listen to what he's saying. He's given Torah all over the place. He's given sound instruction, doctrine. Doctrine is more like if you have 50 churches out there and you're all under the same doctrine, you've all got the same information from the Ruach. And it's being also confirmed through Paul because he's given it to you. And when you have heard this and you were part of that, and you were that room when you had the tongues of fire on you, when the Ruach was banging away, you don't have that today. We don't sit in churches and you don't see tongues of fire coming from anybody. Do you? Hasn't happened since then, has it? There's a reason for that. Paul, there's a reason for him. There is no church of Paul. Now, there are churches of Paul out there, but what I'm saying is Paul never went out there and created, now this is Paul's church. Paul's now dealing with Rome. He's writing the book of Romans, the Corinthians and the Colossians and all those places where the churches, the synagogues went. If you say synagogues, it confuses you with Jewishness. The difference between the Jewishness is they do not believe in Yeshua. Then there's Messianic Judaism. Those that do believe in Yeshua, that the same that will believe, because almost everybody in the Shavuot, in the Pentecost, were Jewish. Okay? It's not that they all quit after that and retired. These people became believers, and then other Gentiles and they grafted in, the other tribes were all taken off. And Paul comes along and keeps them in the correct path. He keeps them in that New Covenant Torah that we paid so much attention to that I give you here. A great majority of what we're reading here in the New Covenant is Torah. Plain and simple. And it's a newer and it's a better, if you haven't noticed, than the Old Testament. That Torah was correct. Royal Torah is the feast, the seasons, the Shabbats, the weekly Shabbats, the high season Shabbats, which appointed times and so forth, which are all feast and festivals. The spring feast and festivals of the first barley. And then the Shavuot that comes in the wheat. And then the fall festival, which is all the other fruit and the grapes and the vines and the fruit and the trees and so forth. That is all. That's what happens today. So there are 3 primary feasts and festivals. And that is to never change, Ellen White. Ellen White, pay attention to what I'm saying. Oh, you're dead. And so is your church. And so the people, because if you're listening to what she says, she tried to do away with all that. Saying, well, we don't do that. That's a Jewish thing. There's that Jewish thing, Ellen White. Just because it didn't happen in 1891, 1892, when you wrote all these theses and so forth and kept your church going, that doesn't mean it was correct. It's one thing a good person who hears and obeys, named Christian or otherwise, is when you know you're wrong, you get on the air and you say, I was wrong, and this is what it should be. Or I wrote this book, and now that I may lose some money selling this book, I'm going to be honest that part of chapter so-and-so of this book that I wrote is wrong. You don't you don't hear that from the mainline institutionalized Christian pastors and all you other people out there selling your wares on television and in the bookstores and on DVDs and YouTube. How often do you hear someone get on there and say, I've done it about 15 times already. I've made some corrections. One of the biggest ones, rapture, understanding that super pre-rapture stuff. Boy, did I eat that junk up for about 20 years. All right. We left you last time in chapter 12, and we're going to hit some Torah. You ready? Chapter 12, verse 2. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world. I mean, come out of her, my people. Be set apart. But be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then, in other words, you've had something in your mind, and now you're going to renew it. You're not just a blank idiot standing there, and then you erase everything on. You push a button over here, and you erase everything, and then you fill it full of all new stuff. You're still going to remember a bunch of old stuff. You have to daily walk the walk and renew your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what Elohim's will is. He is good, His pleasing, and His perfect will. Verse 3, Torah. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance with the measure, the faith that Elohim has given you. And there's a whole bunch of Torah in a row. Oh my goodness. We're still in chapter 12, 6 through 21. Every bit is Torah. Need to read it. We have different gifts according to the grace given us. Different gifts, folks. Don't judge somebody else. If a man's gift is prophesying, let him use it in proportion to his faith. If it's serving, let him serve. If it's teaching, let him teach. If it's encouraging, then let him encourage. If it's contributing to the needs of others, then let him give generously. If it's leadership, in other words, if somebody gives $100 and you give 25 cents, you're doing okay. Don't put yourself down so much. These churches will come on you about that. We need more money from you. Let me see your income. Let me see yours. And most of you preachers, looks like you've been eating too much of your income. How many fat, obese preachers have we got there? Goodness sakes. Let him govern diligently. I'm sorry. I've got to laugh. If it's showing mercy, let him do it cheerfully. Love must be sincere. Hate what's evil. Cling to what's good. Be devoted to one another. Brotherly love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never lacking in zeal, but keep your ruach fervor serving Yahweh. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with Elohim's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people on a low position. Do not be conceited. In your neighborhood, you may have a bunch of a-hole people living around you. I mean, it's just a bad neighborhood besides criminals and everything else. Don't let the criminals in your house, and don't mamby-pamby. They're criminals. And if people are worthless and hateful, then don't be around and be separate. But be a decent person in that community so that anyone who would look at you that don't know you would say, well, I don't know much about that person over there, but obviously pretty smart because they don't hang with us. Or they're obviously pretty decent because I've never seen them do or hate or give the finger to anybody or hate or throw rocks at somebody or lie and cheat or steal or gossip. Verse 17, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what's right in the eyes of everybody. If it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. If it's possible, notice that one. Do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for Elohim's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says Yahweh. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. That's a good one. Mean that. But, and don't expect that immediately the first time. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. I sometimes think of people like dogs. So did Yeshua at times. He mentioned them. They're like dogs. It's a good analogy. Sometimes when you deal with a dog that's been a mean, rotten, stupid dog or been beaten by its owner, it takes a lot of love before that dog finally loves you back. it takes time. Verse 13. Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which Elohim has established. The authorities that exist have established by Elohim. I believe that in the elections and all this other stuff, the top leadership is put in by Elohim, because if a society is evil and worthless and hateful and just pray only when things are going well, and then only pray when things are going really bad, it's one or the other, and things just would go better if they're just torn to pieces. Maybe the neighborhood will finally waken up. Maybe you will finally waken up and pray to the Yahweh and talk to him every single day. But if it takes an act of Congress to knock you off your feet, would Yahweh allow an evil leadership to knock you off your feet so that you're talking to him? He knows who the government leader is. If the government leader is a person who does good things but totally ignores Yeshua, have you ever prayed to Yeshua or God? Oh, I've never had a reason to do that. Do you know a president who said that? I do. And is he doing good things for the people right now? If you think he is, but he doesn't believe in Yeshua, similar to Cyrus, isn't it? Here we go. Even the evil people, Yahweh knows what's going on. He's pretty smart. Verse 3, chapter 13, for rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of one in authority? Then do what is right, and he will commend you. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, because of conscience. Well, it's hard to do these days. Verse 7, give everyone what you owe him. If you owe taxes, pay your taxes. If it's the IRS, in other words, I better quote it. This is all Torah. If revenue, then revenue. But you know what I'm saying. If respect, then respect, and honor, then honor. Let no debt remain outstanding except for the continuing debt to love one another, for he who loves his fellow man has fulfilled the Torah. The commandments: do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not covet, and whatever other commandments there may be are summed up in this one rule: love your neighbor as yourself. You'll notice that Yeshua puts about adultery and murder and stealing and lying all together. And they're all bad. And do this, verse 11, understand the present time. The hour has come for you to wake up from your slumber, because Yeshua is nearer than when we first believed. The night is nearly over. The day is almost there. So let us put aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us behave decently as in the daytime, not in orgies and drunkenness, not in sexual morality, debauchery, not in dissension, not in jealousy. A compelling reason to leave the denominational organized institutional churches is the very fact, now this is comment, that their membership has a divorce rate equal to or higher than the general public. Once again, it is horrible, folks. Verse 14, rather clothe yourself with Master Yeshua Messiah, and do not think about how to gratify the desires of a sinful nature. Chapter 14, verse 1, accept him whose faith is weak, without passing judgment on disputable matters. I've talked about this. It's very, very important. If someone is walking the line and they're slower, or they're dumber than you, or they're smarter and better than you, and you're still walking the line, you're not going to agree with each other at all times, because you're still miles apart. You can't see each other. And guys, men are visual. They've got to see things. Women are better at feelings and emotions and reading things and words that are said to them. That's how they get their understanding. That's why men and women are so important, to put them together. Look what you got. You get a powerful combination there. So we're going to leave you in chapter 14, and we're going to start at verse 3 next time. So continue the faith. There was a whole bunch of Torah in this, wasn't there? Amen.